Bob Ross's peaceful image, shattered by death, disputes, and a lost legacy. What really happened after Bob Ross passed away? Behind the calm voice, happy trees, and iconic afro lies a tale of legal battles, lost family rights, and an abandoned home hiding in the woods. Stay tuned to discover the heartbreaking truth they never wanted you to know. Personal life and family. Bob Ross was a calming presence for millions of people. Bob's journey to fame wasn't the usual one. He didn't come from a family of artists or dream of being on TV. Instead, his story began in a place far away from the world of fame. He started in the U.S. Air Force. While stationed in Alaska, Bob found his passion for painting. The beautiful and peaceful Alaskan landscape inspired him, and it was there that he learned the painting technique that would define his career, the wet-on-wet technique. This method allowed him to paint quickly, layering wet paint on top of other wet paint to create smooth, lifelike landscapes. It was a technique that set him apart from others and would later make him famous. After leaving the military, Bob decided to pursue his true passion, painting. He didn't go looking for fame or fortune, though. He just wanted to share his love for art with the world. In 1983, Bob got the chance to do just that when he started hosting The Joy of Painting on PBS. At first, Bob didn't think much would come of the show. It was just another painting tutorial on TV. But something about Bob's calm voice, gentle demeanor, and simple way of teaching made viewers feel at ease. People loved him. They didn't just watch him paint. They felt like they were spending time with a friend. Bob had a way of making painting feel easy, even for those who had never picked up a paintbrush before. His soothing voice, famous for saying things like, "There are no mistakes, just happy accidents," made him beloved by millions. As the show grew in popularity, so did Bob's fame. The Joy of Painting ran for 11 years, from 1983 until 1994. During this time, Bob became more than just a TV host. He became a symbol of calm, peace, and creativity in a world that often felt chaotic. Watching Bob paint wasn't just about learning how to create beautiful landscapes. It was about taking a break from everyday stress and finding joy in the simple things. Even after the show ended, Bob's influence didn't fade. His shows continued to be aired, and people still tuned in to watch his comforting presence. He became an icon, known for his ability to make people feel relaxed and creative. What made Bob special wasn't just his skill as an artist, it was how he made his audience feel. His soft-spoken, kind nature resonated with anyone who watched him. Bob Ross walked into people's homes with nothing but a canvas and a whisper. He offered peace where the world gave chaos, always painting calm skies while storm clouds hovered in his own life. To his audience, he was endlessly gentle, like a friend who never raised his voice. But behind that calm lived a man of intense contradictions, fiercely private yet profoundly connected, gentle in manner but resolute in conviction. And his personal life, especially the way he loved and lost, told a story far more textured than any mountain range he ever painted. Those closest to Bob knew him as a man who believed in healing through creation. Friends recall that he never spoke poorly of anyone, even during breakups or fights. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was a kind of armor. One of his former producers, speaking anonymously in a 2015 piece for Mental Floss, shared, he didn't like confrontation. If something hurt him, he'd go paint a lake instead of starting an argument. That was Bob. He painted his way through pain. That philosophy bled into his relationships. His first wife, Vivian Ridge, met him long before the world knew his name. Back then, he was just a soft-spoken Air Force medical technician with a talent for making pictures appear from empty space. Their marriage was quiet, private, and short-lived, but it gave him his greatest joy, his son, Steve Ross. Steve once told the Joy of Painting Fan podcast that Bob wasn't the typical dad. He didn't yell, he didn't punish. He just talked to you like you were someone worth listening to, even when you were wrong. Steve, a talented painter in his own right, appeared on his father's show a few times. But those moments weren't about fame. They were about presence. Bob's smile was always just a little wider when Steve was on screen. His second marriage to Jane Ross seemed more like a deep friendship wrapped in romance. They married in 1977, when Bob was just beginning to rise in the public eye. Jane stood beside him quietly, often managing the more chaotic aspects of his growing fame. She stayed out of interviews, but Ross referenced her in small, sweet ways on his show. In one 1985 episode of The Joy joy of painting, he looked off camera and smiled, saying, "That's for Jane. She always liked the trees that lean a little." Their time together was cut short when Jane passed away in 1992. The loss, though rarely mentioned by Ross in public, left a visible change in his demeanor. He kept smiling, of course, but the eyes behind the smile softened, as though holding back a tide. In a brief 1993 interview with PBS Chicago, when asked if painting helped him through hard times, he responded simply, "It's the only thing that ever did." He remarried just 2 months before his death in 1995. Linda Brown, his third wife, wasn't part of the public eye. Their marriage was quiet, almost secretive. Some close to Ross suggested it was a practical decision, possibly for health care or legal protection, as he faced terminal lymphoma. But others, like his longtime friend and fellow painter Dana Jester, told Art Insider that Bob just didn't like dying alone. He needed someone to hold the silence with him. Through all of this, one constant in his life, perhaps more enduring than any marriage, was his love for animals. He often brought them onto his show: squirrels, raccoons, baby deer. One fan favorite was Peapod the pocket squirrel, who sometimes curled up in Ross's pocket while he painted. "Animals don't judge," he once told People magazine in 1991. "They don't care how many mistakes you've made. They just love you for showing up." This empathy extended to the way Ross saw people. Those who visited his home recalled being treated not as guests, but as companions. "He'd stop what he was doing and ask about your life," said Susan Blake, a former neighbor who spoke to Florida Life and Home in 2002. Even if he had 5 things going on, he made time, always. And yet, for all his warmth, Ross was cautious with his personal boundaries. He shared smiles, but rarely shared sorrow. He gave you color, but kept the canvas of his private world tightly held. It wasn't until the release of the Netflix documentary that fans realized how much he had endured. Loss, betrayal, corporate battles, but had never once painted any of it onto the public's canvas. Still, in his own quiet way, Bob Ross left clues about who he was. He painted hearts into the trunks of trees. He added tiny cabins that always had smoke curling from their chimneys. Little signs of life, warmth, and someone waiting inside. These weren't just techniques. They were messages, a love letter in oil and bristle. What happens when peace becomes a product and the painter becomes a brand? Let us tell you. Bob Ross was not just a painter. He was a brand, a beacon of peace and joy in a world that often felt too busy, too chaotic. In 1985, Ross and his second wife, Jane, along with business partners Annette and Walt Kowalski, co-founded Bob Ross, Inc. The company wasn't just a business venture. It was a carefully orchestrated effort to bring his teachings, his methods, and his personality into homes across the globe. The company's goal was to make Bob Ross a household name, not just for his paintings, but for his philosophy. The idea was simple: take the joy of painting, give people the tools to embrace their creativity, and allow them to do it all while following Ross's soothing instructions. Annette Kowalski, who often managed the logistical side of things, became as much a part of the Bob Ross legacy as the man himself. She understood that the key to Bob's success was the authenticity of his message. It was never about selling art supplies. It was about selling the idea that anyone could do it, Annette explained in a rare 2017 interview with Art and Business magazine. Bob was teaching more than just painting. He was teaching self-expression, calmness, and personal peace. But like many great businesses, Ross's company would find itself at the intersection of passion and profit. The Kowalskis had a vision for Bob Ross Inc. that extended beyond art supplies. They saw the potential for books, instructional videos, and eventually the licensing of his name and likeness. Ross, however, was a man whose priorities were always personal rather than financial. He was less concerned with the empire he was building and more focused on the individuals who watched his show. In an interview with PBS's American Masters series, Ross once said, "I never thought about it as being a business. I just wanted to make people happy. When I started, all I cared about was teaching others how to paint. I didn't realize it would become this big thing." To Ross, the act of painting was deeply personal. It wasn't about about fame or fortune. It was about spreading joy and showing others that creativity could be a form of therapy. But after Jane's untimely death, the delicate balance between art and commerce shifted. The Kowalskis, now holding the majority share of Bob Ross Inc., began to take a more active role in the company's direction. For them, Bob Ross had become not just a beloved artist, but a brand with immense financial potential. But for Ross, the changes were deeply unsettling. His focus remained on teaching and sharing his passion for painting, but now there was tension. There were moments when Bob felt like a passenger on a ship that wasn't headed in the direction he wanted, said Steve Ross, Bob's son, in a candid 2015 interview with Rolling Stone. He had no interest in turning into a corporate machine. It was never about making millions. It was always about helping people. Yet, the business of Bob Ross Incorporated continued to grow. Merchandising exploded as the demand for Ross's likeness soared. T-shirts, mugs, and even bed linens emblazoned with his iconic happy little trees became symbols of a cultural movement, a celebration of relaxation and simplicity. For some, it was a nostalgia trip. For others, it was a connection to a simpler, more peaceful time. The marketing of Ross's image reached an all-time high, but so did the legal battles. After Ross's death, the Kowalskis took full control of Bob Ross Inc., leading to a flurry of disputes over the rights to his image and name. It was clear that the business wasn't just about creativity anymore. It was about money. While the Kowalskis had transformed Bob's image into a lucrative brand, many who knew Bob felt conflicted about the way his legacy was being handled. "I think Bob would have hated to see it turn into a money machine," said Dana Jester, a longtime friend and fellow artist, in an interview with the Art Journal in 2000. "He wasn't the type to want his name plastered everywhere. He painted for the soul, not the wallet." The Kowalskis, who were pivotal in pushing Bob Ross Inc. to new heights, became the target of criticism as they appeared to shift the company's focus away from Ross's original mission. But in spite of the business entanglements and controversies, as the years go on, his empire continues to flourish. But the man behind it, Bob Ross, would have likely never guessed that his simple desire to teach others how to paint would one day become a global enterprise. But if his brand flourished, what became of the place where Bob Ross truly felt at home? The abandoned house and posthumous legacy. After Bob Ross passed away, his legacy quickly became a tangled web of legal disputes, business maneuvers, and unanswered questions. One of the most poignant symbols of these unresolved issues was his former home and studio, nestled in the quiet woods of New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The property that once buzzed with creative energy, where Ross crafted his serene landscapes and beloved television shows, fell into obscurity after his death. Yet the house remained an eerie monument to the man who had touched the lives of millions. For years, it stood silent and largely forgotten, reflecting the conflicts that arose over the commercial use of his image and the brand he had built with his own hands. The complex web of Bob Ross Inc. was the primary factor behind the erosion of Ross's influence in the years following his death. His business partners, Annette and Walt Kowalski, who had helped him build the brand during the latter years of his life, took control of the company after his passing. While they had been pivotal in turning Ross's painting show into a global phenomenon, their posthumous control of Ross's name, image, and even his signature phrases raised many questions. Was Ross's legacy, once defined by humility and a love for teaching, now being manipulated purely for profit? A major turning point occurred after Ross's second wife, Jane, passed away. Her death left Ross vulnerable, and the Kowalskis gained a larger share of Bob Ross Inc. By the time of his death, Ross's image had transformed from that of a beloved TV personality to a highly commercialized brand. His cheerful demeanor and happy little trees had been repackaged into a series of products: brushes, paint, instructional materials, and more. While this was undoubtedly a lucrative venture, it began to distance Ross from the brand that bore his name. In the years following his death, the Kowalskis continued to capitalize on Bob Ross's image. They launched new products and media initiatives under his name, all the while consolidating their control over the company. In interviews with outlets like the New York Times and Vanity Fair, they admitted to the challenges of managing Ross's legacy in such a public and commercially successful way. The Kowalskis insisted that they were keeping Bob Ross's spirit alive by making his art accessible to millions. But many saw this as an erosion of the very principles that made Bob Ross's show a beloved, calming presence on television. Amid these commercial battles, Ross's family, particularly his son Steve, found themselves on the outside looking in. Steve Ross, in interviews with the Daily Beast and the Modern Met, expressed his frustrations with being excluded from discussions about his father's image and legacy. In spite of being Bob Ross's only son, Steve had little say in the direction the company took after his father's passing. The Kowalskis held the majority of shares in Bob Ross Inc., leaving Steve with little control over the fortune that was generated from his father's name. In the documentary Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed, Steve opened up about the personal toll that the disputes over his father's legacy had taken on him. "They took everything," Steve lamented, explaining how he had been sidelined in the decision-making process, particularly when it came to how Bob Ross's name was used for commercial purposes. Steve also expressed how painful it was to see his father's name on products that didn't reflect the peaceful, gentle man he had known. Ross's son was not alone in his frustrations. Fans and critics alike began to wonder if the commercialization of Ross's brand had gone too far. Many felt that his legacy, once rooted in kindness, serenity, and artistry, had been overshadowed by the aggressive marketing strategies employed by those who controlled his brand. The property where Ross had lived and painted, though not widely known, held its own quiet significance. Over the years, the house began to fall into disrepair. Neighbors, like Kenneth, who spoke with Indianapolis Monthly, remembered the peacefulness that surrounded the property during Ross's time there. Kenneth recalled watching Bob Ross paint from the porch of his home, a sight that left a lasting impact. "He never turned us away," Kenneth recalled. "He'd wave, ask if we wanted to see how clouds are made, then just paint them into the sky right there in front of us." The simplicity and warmth of these interactions contrasted sharply with the legal and financial wrangling over Bob Ross's legacy. The documentary also revealed how Ross's home had become almost as elusive as the man himself. In an article for the New York Times, cultural reporter Amanda Hess tried to track down the exact location of the property, but found it nearly impossible to pinpoint. The house, much like Ross's legacy, was shrouded in mystery. It had fallen out of public consciousness and into a sort of limbo, reflecting the unresolved nature of the battles surrounding Bob Ross Inc. Some even speculated that the home had been abandoned and was being purposefully hidden, with no one willing to step forward to claim ownership. It was as though the house, like the legacy of Bob Ross, was lost in time, both a symbol of what had been and a reminder of the messy, unfinished business left behind. In spite of its dilapidated state, some believed the home should be preserved as a museum or a place of tribute to Ross's memory. Yet others argued that it should remain untouched, a quiet testament to the man who had lived there and the calm philosophy he had espoused. Ross's son, Steve, reflecting on the home in an interview with the Daily Beast, acknowledged the emotional significance of the house. "That house meant more to my father than any television studio ever did," he said. "That's where he went when he was sick. That's where he said goodbye." Even as the world moves on, that house stands still, a reminder of Bob Ross's true essence. A man who, despite the commercial success he unwittingly created, always preferred to leave a quiet mark on the world. As the house faded into silence, a lingering question remains. Who truly inherited Bob Ross's legacy? Come with us to know. Death and legal battles. In the final years of his life, Bob Ross sought to ensure that his legacy would remain within his family. He amended his estate plan, intending to leave the rights to his name, likeness, and artistic works to his son, Steve Ross, and half-brother, Jimmy Cox. Specifically, he allocated 51% to Cox and 49% to Steve, hoping this arrangement would preserve his life's work within his family. But Ross's efforts were undermined by earlier business agreements. Years before, he had co-founded Bob Ross Incorporated, BRI, with his wife Jane and business partners Annette and Walt Kowalski. Following Jane's passing, her shares were redistributed, leaving Ross as a minority shareholder in the company that bore his name. This shift in ownership set the stage for a protracted legal battle over Ross's legacy. After Ross's death, the Kowalskis asserted that they held the rights to his intellectual property, citing prior agreements. They pursued legal action to gain full control over Ross's works, including his paintings, instructional materials, and even his art supplies. The aggressive nature of their claims led some to refer to the situation as Grand Theft Bob. Faced with mounting legal pressure and limited resources, Cox, as the executor of Ross's estate, settled with the Kowalskis in 1997, effectively transferring all rights to BRI. Steve Ross, unaware of the full extent of his father's estate plans, discovered the trust's provisions 2 decades later. In 2017, he filed a lawsuit against BRI, seeking recognition of his rights to his father's legacy. But the court ruled that prior agreements between Ross and the Kowalskis superseded the trust, leaving Steve without any claim to the intellectual property. The court's decision maintained that the rights couldn't have been given to Ross through the trust, as the trust did not originally possess these rights. The ruling clarified plaintiff would not own the intellectual property at issue because the trust never owned it. Similarly, because Bob Ross gave BRI his right to publicity during his lifetime, it could not have transferred to his son on his death. In spite of these challenges, Steve Ross found a way to honor his father's legacy on his own terms. In 2019, he began hosting painting workshops, sharing the techniques and philosophies his father had taught him. These sessions, held in the same spirit of encouragement and creativity that defined the joy of painting, allowed Steve to connect with fans and keep his father's teachings alive. He was joined in this venture by his father's old friend, Dana Jester. In September 2019, they held their first workshop, where several dozen artists gathered to learn from the 2 most talented masters of the Bob Ross painting technique still alive today. So, if Bob Ross never chased wealth, how did his name go on to build a multi-million-dollar empire? Stay with us to know. Net worth and enduring influence. Bob Ross's impact on the world is far richer than any monetary measure. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated to be around $1 million, a sum that might seem modest for a man whose face and voice have since become iconic. But his true legacy extends far beyond the numbers. What he created wasn't just a brand, it was a cultural revolution that touched the hearts of millions, transcending his modest financial standing and becoming an enduring symbol of creativity, tranquility, and the joy of making art. While many artists dream of fame and fortune, Bob Ross never sought either. His success was never about accumulating wealth. It was about sharing a love for painting and a message of peace. In a 1988 interview with The New Yorker, Bob confessed, "I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to teach people to paint and enjoy their lives." This modest perspective shaped his entire career, as he always emphasized that painting should be fun, not a competitive endeavor. "Painting should be fun," he would say often. "It should never feel like a chore." He avoided the commercialization of his image, preferring instead to share the joy of art with his audience. He was a man focused on enriching lives, not building an empire. Yet, after his passing, Bob's influence only grew. In 1985, Bob Ross Inc. BRY was founded by Bob and his second wife, Jane, to manage the rights to his paintings and instructional materials. The business started modestly, but exploded after Bob's death. It was managed by the Kowalskis, who were involved with BRI, and their efforts sparked a series of legal battles regarding the ownership and commercialization of his image. What Bob never set out to create was a multi-million-dollar empire, but his genuine presence and timeless message ended up achieving just that. In spite of his modest earnings during his life, Bob's name is now synonymous with peace and creativity. His face appears on t-shirts, coffee mugs, and countless other products. Art supplies once used during his show, The Joy of Painting, are now a staple in many stores. His shows, once aired on PBS, are now streamed globally on platforms like YouTube, Netflix, and Twitch. introducing his teachings to an entirely new generation. Bob Ross, Inc. continues to generate millions of dollars annually, far exceeding the revenue Bob himself could have ever imagined. But the real worth of his legacy lies not in the financial success his brand generates, but in the impact his teachings had on countless lives. Bob Ross's message was one of comfort and inclusivity. He wasn't teaching viewers how to paint perfect pictures, he was teaching them how to embrace the process and appreciate the mistakes along the way. In interviews with outlets like People and The New Yorker, many artists shared how Bob had inspired them to pick up their brushes and explore their creative potential. One artist noted, "Bob Ross didn't just teach people how to paint landscapes, he taught people how to live a little more joyfully." For many, it wasn't about mastering the technicalities of painting. It was about gaining confidence to try and learning that imperfection was part of the beauty. Bob's simple yet profound philosophy, that there are no mistakes, only happy accidents, resonated deeply with viewers. It wasn't just his painting skills that inspired people, but the way he spoke about life. He encouraged his audience to find peace in the creative process, saying in a 1990 PBS interview, "If I can teach people to paint, I can teach them to enjoy their lives more. And that's what matters." Today, his influence continues, especially with younger generations who have embraced his persona. Social media platforms are filled with Bob Ross challenges and viral memes that reimagine his image in playful and often humorous ways. He has also found a home on platforms like Twitch, where people now watch live-streamed painting sessions, proving that his influence is not just enduring, but evolving with the times. Bob Ross may not have envisioned becoming a digital phenomenon, but his gentle presence continues to captivate new audiences in innovative ways. Even as Bob Ross's face continues to appear on merchandise and art supplies, his core message remains unchanged. His legacy is not about the products that bear his likeness or the money that his brand generates. It's about the lasting impact he made on individuals who found solace, joy, and a sense of accomplishment in their creative endeavors. His art captured the serenity of nature and the wonder of creation, reminding us that life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Bob Ross's true wealth lies not in dollars, but in the lives he touched, the creative spark he ignited in people, and the positive, calming force he became in the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to click on the cards for more exciting celebrity tales and all the Hollywood updates you won't want to miss.